There's some breaking news out of the United States now when key Trump ally, at least a one-time former Trump ally, and political operative Roger Stone has been sentenced to 40 months in prison. Let's go to Aaron Blake now, senior political reporter from The Washington Post. Aaron, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. So Roger was a bit of a master of the dark arts, wasn't he? Can you bring us up to speed with what happened today?
Yeah, so basically Roger Stone was convicted on 7 counts, most of them having to do with lying to investigators, obstruction of justice, basically, as the judge put it today, covering up for the president in a various number of ways. So this has been a long, ongoing trial. There have been outside factors here, most notably with the Justice Department intervening to reduce his recommended sentence after the president raised concerns about it. There have been allegations that the Justice Department has been politicized by President Trump. And then in the courtroom today, we had some interesting scenes where the prosecutor who is now handling the case seemed to go against the Attorney General who had moved to reduce that sentencing recommendation. So the 40-month sentence is very significant, especially given this is only the most recent Trump ally to go to prison. There are a number of them that have. But also it really drove home the idea that the president has been meddling in events in the Justice Department and politicizing investigations.
All eyes on the Democrats' debate yesterday in Las Vegas, and it was rapid fire, even a baptism of fire for Michael Bloomberg, you'd have to say.
Yeah, so Michael Bloomberg has been running an unorthodox campaign. He is not competing in the first 4 primary states, but he is spending heavily in states that are further down the calendar, and the polls have suggested that's working. At the same time, he hadn't participated in a debate yet. He actually hasn't done one since 2009. He also really hasn't been subjected to much scrutiny because he doesn't really give interviews. He doesn't appear on the trail and take questions from reporters. So this was really the first time he was scrutinized on the spot and asked to account for many things that he said in the past. And all accounts are that he didn't handle this terribly well, that other candidates were really ganging up on him and making it very difficult for him. So he was looking like a candidate who was really rising in this race, maybe competing with Bernie Sanders for the nomination. And right now that's more in doubt.
Well, he was absolutely savaged by Elizabeth Warren, wasn't he, Aaron? And I'm wondering how the polls are tracking after yesterday's debate and how that might lead into the next primary for Bloomberg anyway.
Yeah, we haven't seen any polls quite yet. I would imagine we'll get some pretty soon here. The big poll, of course, is on Saturday in Nevada. Bloomberg is not competing in that race, but Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are. Warren really hit on a lot of the things that we expected Michael Bloomberg to be attacked on. A policy of stopping and frisking people in New York City when he was mayor that disproportionately targeted minorities. Also, the treatment of women at his various businesses, where there's been a lot of in-depth reporting on settlements and non-disclosure agreements. Very kind of significant things that you knew he would have to deal with, but Warren really drove that home and basically made the argument that he has not thoroughly addressed these things, that he needs to be brought to account for them, and that perhaps we need to be focusing on these things a little bit more intently.
The establishment would have to be worried about California in particular, given the recent polls have shown that Bernie Sanders is up around 33%. That's surely a concern going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain elements of the Democratic Party which are concerned about Bernie Sanders, who looks like the most likely nominee at this point. He does well in a number of those Super Tuesday states in the coming weeks here, most notably California, which of course has the most delegates. If he were to do well there, it would be very difficult for another candidate to pass him in the delegate race. And so I think you're going to see in the coming weeks, as the party gets closer to making Bernie Sanders the favorite, whether they're comfortable with that, whether they're comfortable with somebody who calls himself a Democratic Socialist becoming the nominee of this party. And that's what all these other candidates are banking on, is the idea that the party will suddenly decide they're not comfortable with that idea. They'll go with a more moderate candidate who maybe has a broader appeal to the American electorate.
Aaron, when it comes to Joe Biden, what's the word coming out from his camp at the moment? Are they kind of getting ready to tap out, or do they still feel like they're hanging in there?
Well, they are hanging in there. The big state for them is the one after Nevada, which is the South Carolina primary. He looks like he still has a good shot of winning there. He's in the hunt in some of the other states that follow that. So he could grab a number of delegates moving forward here. At the same time, it doesn't look like he is really competing for the lead in this race anymore. It looks like he's competing to basically stay in and hope that something changes. It just doesn't seem to be working in any way like it looked like it was a few weeks ago when he looked like he was the most likely nominee. He was the one that Democrats thought was the best to run against President Trump. And he was really counting on showing that he was the most electable candidate in this race.
Well, it is non-compulsory voting in the United States, so you often have some pretty out there policies to encourage people to get out and vote on the day. And all the candidates seem to have that. Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, obviously there's concerns about their broader appeal as well. But when it comes down to it, are we looking at a contested convention?
You know, it's a very distinct possibility. If you look at what happened in the debate last night, all of the candidates were asked if they would abide by whoever had the most delegates, even if that person didn't get a majority of the delegates, which is what you need to actually win the nomination. 5 of the 6 candidates would not commit to that. The only person who did was Bernie Sanders, who looks like he will probably have the most delegates, at least if current trends hold. So it's looking more and more like those candidates are holding out hope that maybe he won't get enough delegates, maybe the party will do something at the convention to install a new nominee, but that would be a very messy situation, lead to a lot of hard feelings among Sanders supporters, and I'm not sure it's necessarily the best outcome for the party, even if they do have concerns about Bernie Sanders.
It was interesting yesterday, Aaron, that someone online basically said after lining up all of those attendees at that debate yesterday that if Bill Clinton stood amongst them, he would be the 3rd youngest out of all of them, which I thought was interesting. And I'm just wondering, when it comes to Bernie Sanders, you know, he's 78 years old. Do you see that working against him? I mean, that's getting up there.
Yeah, 78 years old. 2 other candidates are at least 77 years old. Bernie Sanders suffered a heart attack on the campaign trail just a few months ago. And there was some questions last night at the debate about how forthcoming he has been with his medical information in the aftermath of that. He hasn't provided exactly what he has said he would. I would expect that will be a continued focus for people who are warning about having him as the nominee. But at this point, it doesn't seem to be mattering for Democratic primary voters. He only seems to have gotten stronger since having the heart attack, even though people have started to point to his age. So we'll see how that pans out. But right now, it doesn't seem to be really dampering enthusiasm for his candidacy.
No, feeling the burn. Feeling the burn they are, his supporters anyway. Aaron Blake, good to get your thoughts this morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.